Welcome to the AM Update, Week in Review. A collection of the best moments from Aaron McIntyre's morning update.
Let's go first to this from the chairman for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That would be Dan Caine, who went into more details about the operation to bring into custody Nicolas Maduro, now former Venezuelan dictator.
Last night, the president ordered the United States military to move forward with this mission. He said to us, and we appreciate it, Mr. President, good luck and Godspeed. And those words were transmitted to the entire joint force. Over the course of the night, aircraft began launching from 20 different bases on land and sea across the Western Hemisphere. In total, more than 150 aircraft, bombers, fighters, intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance, rotary wing were in the air last night. Thousands and thousands of hours of experience were airborne. Our youngest crew member was 20, and our oldest crew member was 49, and there's simply no match for American military might. As the night began, the helicopters took off with the extraction force, which included law enforcement officers, and began their flight into Venezuela at 100 feet above the water. As they approached Venezuelan shores, the United States began layering different effects provided by Spacecom, Cybercom, and other members of the interagency to create a pathway. Overhead, those forces were protected by aircraft from the United States Marines, the United States Navy, the United States Air Force, and the Air National Guard. The force included F-22s, F-35s, F-18s, EA-18s, E-2s, B-1 bombers, and other support aircraft, as well as numerous remotely piloted drones. As the force began to approach Caracas, the Joint Air Component began dismantling and disabling the air defense systems in Venezuela, employing weapons to ensure the safe passage of the helicopters into the target area. The goal of our air component was, and always will be to protect the helicopters and the ground force and get them to the target and get them home. As the force crossed the last point of high terrain where they'd been hiding in the clutter, we assessed that we had maintained totally the element of surprise. As the helicopter force ingressed towards the objective at low level, we arrived at Maduro's compound at 1:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 2:01 a.m. Caracas local time, and the apprehension force descended into Maduro's compound and moved with speed, precision, and discipline towards their objective and isolated the area to ensure the safety and security of the ground force while apprehending the indicted persons. On arrival into the target area, the helicopters came under fire, and they replied with that fire with overwhelming force in self-defense. One of our aircraft was hit, but remained flyable, and as the president said earlier today, all of our aircraft came home, and that aircraft remained flyable during the rest of the mission. As the operation unfolded at the compound, our air and ground intelligence teams provided real-time updates to the ground force, ensuring those forces could safely navigate the complex environment without unnecessary risk. The force remained protected by overhead tactical aviation. Maduro and his wife, both indicted, gave up and were taken into custody by the Department of Justice, assisted by our incredible U.S. military with professionalism and precision.
Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Caine, in more detailed explanation of the operation that captured now former Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro. This is now two times in the past 6-ish months, the United States military has sent a message. The first time, Operation Midnight Hammer, was this: you cannot hide, you cannot protect your nuclear facilities or any other sort of infrastructure for ill motivation, ill intent, whether it's nuclear weapons or otherwise. You cannot hide, you cannot protect your nuclear facilities or other infrastructure if you're within a 14,000-mile round trip of our B-2 bombers, and you're going to have no idea what's happening until the bombs actually explode. That was the message sent by Operation Midnight Hammer. The second message was this: there is no title, President of Venezuela, Commander-in-Chief of Venezuela. There's no title. There's no fortress. Maduro and his wife tried to reach a safe room inside their heavily fortified compound. Couldn't even do that. And there's no force. I mean, from what we can see so far, there was really no anti-aircraft in Venezuela that actually worked. So there's no title, no fortress, no force that can keep you safe if we want to put you on a slow boat to the federal courthouse of our choosing in the middle of the night. That was the message that was sent over the weekend. I don't really care if you like or agree with any of these actions. The reality is that these operations have projected terrifying strength. Terrifying strength. It is scary what we are capable of. And you know who that's scary to as well? If it's scary to me, you know, I'm on Team America. If it's scary to me, guess what it is to an enemy of America? Terrifying. Terrifying. I mean, what a change from the senility of Joe Biden, the feebleness of Joe Biden, and the assured vacuousness of Kamala Gook. So those are the messages that the United States military has sent. So putting that aside, what's going on in Venezuela? People have said it's about oil. People have said it's about American hegemony in the West. People have said it's about nation building, that this is going to be no different than Iraq or Afghanistan, to which Marco Rubio correctly put them in their place. This is a much different situation. This is well within our sphere of influence. This is well within the Monroe Doctrine. Well, the Monroe Doctrine was for European colonialism, and we have colonialism. It's Chinese colonialism. It's Iranian colonialism. They're trying to colonize. It's Hezbollah colonialism. They were all trying to colonize Venezuela right here in our own hemisphere. For what reason? There's no other reason than to screw with us, the United States. So the Monroe Doctrine, yes, we should be making that in full force. As Marco Rubio also aptly pointed out, the worldview of a place like Venezuela, much more in line with ours than anywhere in the Middle East outside of Israel. So, for those reasons, is it about the oil? Yes, but not really. Is it about the drugs? Yes, but not really. Is it about hegemony? Yes, but not really. Is it about sending a message? Yes, but not really. It's all of the above. I think closer to home, especially given the fact that, we just saw it over the weekend. And I mentioned this in passing, the Chinese, their Latin America delegation, had a front row seat to this. That's a slap in their face. Their air defense systems, which from what I've seen, Venezuela's air defense systems paid for and brought to you by Chinese money and technology. And they totally failed while the Chinese delegation was in Caracas watching this unfold. What a slap in the face. That's a bitch slap to the Chinese. So was it about sending a message? Yes. Was it about oil and really tapping into Venezuela's oil reserves? Yes, but not for us, for Venezuela. And of course, the global market will reap the benefits. Was it about sending a message and getting some of the worst elements of scum and villainy out of our hemisphere? Yes. All of those things were accomplished in an extremely surgical strike. Now, say this with this in effect. If we're going to nation build in Venezuela, I'd much rather try to nation build in Venezuela than I would in the Middle East. Do we know for sure that's what's going to happen here? No. It sounds like, if you read in between the lines, the United States leadership here is pretty confident that they're going to be able to work through and work with the vice president of Venezuela. So it's not really a regime change. You see those pictures of CIA Director John Ratcliffe sitting next to Donald Trump in the Mar-a-Lago Situation Room? Things that make you go, Things that make you go, Because if you read in between the lines, again, if you're picking up what I'm putting down, if you read between the lines, it sounds like the sitting vice president of Venezuela is probably going to be the point person for the United States running the show. The sitting vice president. So the same regime. And you saw the CIA director sitting right next to Trump in the Situation Room. Again, things that make you go, So, all that said, All that said, I'm totally down with what happened over the weekend. This is an evil man doing evil things with evil intentions in our own hemisphere. Within a day's flight or less of our country. It's really past due that this was done. And by the way, poor Nicolas Maduro, we really are doing him a solid, though. We really are. When you're the head of state, there's a million things to worry about on a daily basis. When you're in prison, there's only one thing to worry about.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at Real AM Update.
Let's go back to around Christmas time, where Tucker Carlson gave an interview with the American Conservative where he discussed in part the poll that emerged from AmFest, which I was privileged to attend back a couple of weeks ago, showing that the number one concern of attendees was the rise of radical Islam. Listen to this.
TPUSA did a poll during AmFest, or I guess it was after AmFest, and they asked the audience what they considered to be the greatest threat to America. And they did put radical Islam at number one. I'm wondering where you think those sentiments are coming from. I mean, I've heard you say before that this is an op and that we all know which foreign government it's actually coming from. Which government is it? And can you explain how that operation works? How is it, kind of lured into those?
From the Israeli government and its many defenders and informal employees in the United States, of course. And I guess I would just say if that was actually, I don't know how people responded to the poll. I don't know who answered it, but, I believe in measuring reality a little more empirically. And, I don't know anyone in the United States in the last 24 years who's been killed by radical Islam.
2009, the Fort Hood shooting. 2013, the Boston Marathon bombing. 2015, the San Bernardino attack. 2016, the Pulse nightclub shooting. 2017, New York City truck attack. 2019, Naval Air Station Pensacola and that shooting. 2025, the New Orleans truck attack that happened on New Year's Day. In 2025, the Boulder, Colorado flamethrower attack against Jews. 2025, the National Guard shooting as well. Those are just three just last year, and that's not a comprehensive list at all. I don't know what's going on with Tucker Carlson. I've given him maximum benefit of the doubt so far. If you want to listen to his show for the guests and just exploring what they believe, I just listened to an entire episode of Tucker Carlson just a few weeks ago with that molecular biologist. Just an incredible story. Somebody who is at the forefront of his field in molecular biology, the building blocks of creation, who basically said, the more I study this, the more I am in awe and enamored with God, the God of the Bible. A fantastic conversation. I think there's value in Tucker Carlson for the guests that he has. Sometimes. Maybe even more most of the time. But in terms of what Tucker Carlson is going through personally with his own worldview, he's all over the place. Just all over the place. And it's unfortunate because he's got a big platform. I think he just needs a lot of prayer. And maybe a few more doses of reality and humility at the same time. Because that's a dude I don't think that really needs the grift money. Not saying that he's running a grift. He's just not somebody who needs that. He married into a fortune. He's not somebody who's motivated by that. I don't think he's even motivated by, being paid off by Qatar or Russia or anything like that. I just think he's weird and all over the place, chaotic from a worldview perspective. And now here's this. Scott Adams, the creator of the uber famous Dilbert comic strip. He's on his last lap. In fact, he's very, very, very close to completing his last lap. Finishing a painful, I'm sure, excruciating battle with prostate cancer. He raised a lot of eyebrows, and I think Scott Adams is a very interesting, a very smart guy. Never really got into Dilbert. I've never listened to an entire episode of his show. The clips that I've seen here and there, I think he's a pretty interesting guy. But here he is raising eyebrows back on January 4th with this message about one more thing he wants to do before he dies.
Whenever I talk about the simulation, and especially when I talk about my own impending death, many of my Christian friends and Christian followers say to me, Scott, you still have time. you should convert to Christianity. And I usually just let that sit because that's not an argument I want to have. I've not been a believer. But I also have respect for any Christian who goes out of their way to try to convert me. Because how would I believe you and believe your own religion if you're not trying to convert me? So I have great respect for people who care enough that they want me to convert and then go out of their way to try to convince me. So you're going to hear for the first time today that it is my plan to convert. So I still have time, but my understanding is you're never too late. And on top of that, any skepticism I have about reality would certainly be instantly answered if I wake up in heaven. I do believe that the dominant Christian theory is that I would wake up in heaven if I have a good life. Yeah, I don't necessarily have to, state something in advance. And so, to my Christian friends, yes, it's coming. So you don't need to talk me into it. I am now convinced that the risk-reward is completely smart. If it turns out that there's nothing there, I've lost nothing. But I've respected your wishes, and I like doing that. If it turns out there is something there, and the Christian model is the closest to it, I win. So with your permission, I promise you that I will convert. But I probably won't spend much time in that phase, so don't expect it to happen today, okay?
Scott Adams, creator of the Dilbert comic strip, on his show on January 4th, and you can hear the weakness in his voice there, promising his Christian listeners and followers he will convert before he dies. Number one, I just want to say good on the Christian listeners and followers of Scott Adams for faithfully witnessing to him, seemingly now for years, that seemingly in his last days, one of the things that Scott Adams cannot escape at all are those Christian witnesses to him. To the fact now that maybe if you were just listening to this completely unbiased and just completely new to the show here, you might even say that he's just trying to brush this off because his Christian listenership is so persistent in their witnessing to him. As in, don't worry, I'll do it. You don't need to worry about it. I'll convert to Christianity later. So good on the Christian listeners and followers of Scott Adams for faithfully witnessing to this man, especially in now his last days battling prostate cancer. You heard Scott Adams mention there, my understanding in regards to when I can convert is that it's never too late. And that is true, it is never too late. But here's the reality as well. It's also never too early. Scott Adams, today is the day of salvation. If you truly are repentant of your sins, even though this battle, this burden that's put before you of this terrible, terrible cancer that has made you feel like death now for, as I understand, well over a year, even in the midst of this, you can still repent. Even if your repentance, this side of heaven lasts for an hour before you go, or maybe God has another year for you on this planet before you go. Today is the day of salvation. I would urge Scott Adams, it seems like he's more receptive to the truth of Scripture, to repenting and believing the gospel, than perhaps ever before. But this might also be a real case of fire insurance. But I come not to deny him, but to encourage him. If you know somebody in a situation like Scott Adams, here's the advice that I would give you. Even if they're treating this as some sort of philosophical, spiritual fire insurance, urge them to pray nonetheless. Maybe in a moment of solitude, to just reach out in faith and say, you know what, God, I don't truly believe here, but if you're real, let's talk. Paul writes in Corinthians, invoking Isaiah, I tell you, now is the time of God's favor. Now is the day of salvation. If you are truly ready to talk to God, that talk should happen now. Because like any of us, the irony is that Scott Adams could go at any moment now. The ironic part is that any of us could go at any minute now. If you're truly a skeptic, but a seeking skeptic, or somewhere on the fence in between then, and you're really thinking about, hey, maybe philosophically, like Scott Adams laid out there, hey, if I'm right, I get to experience heaven. If I'm wrong, then nothing's going to happen because hell doesn't exist either. If that's where you are, I don't consider that scoffing necessarily, not the way Scott Adams presented it there. I do believe that's a seeking skeptic. Now's the day you should have that conversation with your creator. Don't put it off.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at Real AM Update.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is now apparently the potentate of Venezuela, says the United States has a 3-part plan for the future of Venezuela.
As we move forward, we'll describe our process, which is a threefold process in Venezuela. I've described it to them now. Step 1 is the stabilization of the country. We don't want it descending into chaos. Part of that stabilization, and the reason why we understand and believe that we have the strongest leverage possible, is our quarantine. As you've seen today, 2 more ships were seized. We are in the midst right now, and in fact about to execute on a deal to take all the oil. They have oil that is stuck in Venezuela. They can't move it because of our quarantine and because it's sanctioned. We are going to take between 30 and 50 million barrels of oil. We're going to sell it in the marketplace at market rates, not at the discounts Venezuela was getting. That money will then be handled in such a way that we will control how it is dispersed in a way that benefits the Venezuelan people, not corruption, not the regime. So we have a lot of leverage to move on the stabilization front. The second phase will be a phase that we call recovery, and that is ensuring that American, Western, and other companies have access to the Venezuelan market in a way that's fair. Also, at the same time, begin to create the process of reconciliation nationally within Venezuela so that the opposition forces can be amnestied and released and from prisons or brought back to the country and begin to rebuild civil society. And then the third phase, of course, will be one of transition. Some of this will overlap. I've described this to them in great detail. We'll have more detail in the days to follow.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the 3-phase process for the future of Venezuela. It's very much a 10,000-foot view, but there is a thought process here. They're not just flying by the seat of their pants. Stabilization, that's step 1. Recovery, step 2. And transition, phase 3. He went into much more details on steps 1 and 2. I'd like to know more about the third step. And finally, our poll of the week. I asked you, will the United States action in Venezuela have its intended effect? Before we get to those results, though, I want to kind of give this as a preamble. I'm a millennial. One of my first big memories of life was 9/11. I grew up, I was a child, and I came of age during a time in which the United States was, we were told, at war. What we were really doing was nation building with no end in sight, no end mission or goal in sight. Then I became a young adult during the Obama administration, and we were still embedded in the Middle East. Only this time with drones, and a lot of drone strikes, and a lot more treasure, and time, and lives lost. So my generation, maybe in particular, maybe not, have a reflexive disdain, we'll put it that way, for foreign military operations of almost any kind. For example, when the United States was on the table, perhaps, to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities, I kind of balked at that idea. It wasn't going to be a deal breaker. I just didn't like it, just because of that reflexive kicked dog syndrome. And again, I'm somebody, I've got military in my family. I've never served in the military. I just hate seeing lives lost, fortunes lost. For what? Because when we were trying to nation build in the Middle East, it wasn't to avenge Americans. It wasn't to build America's interests. It was very much a war of globalist dogma versus jihad. And nobody wins in that. Nobody wins in that. Globalist dogma was George W. Bush's, really, doctrine when it came to foreign policy. That's why we had to be nice to Muslims while we were bombing some of their home countries. That's why. So that's why, part of the reason why I had this reflexive disdain for almost any sort of military operation that there's not some direct benefit that I can see anyway to America's interests. Because one action here might result in another there, and another there, and another there. Just look at America's involvement in a place like, Somalia. Look that up. Mission creep. Always mission creep. We're not capable of doing anything in the country's best interests. Well, as I stated on Monday, there have been 2 instances in the last 6 months where I'm starting to believe maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's possible for our armed forces, our brave men and women in the military. Maybe it's possible to have leadership that really does just have missions in place for our military, and our military is more than capable, as we've seen, of carrying out some of these daring and, dare I say, super heroic levels of execution. Our goal is to bomb the Fordo nuclear facility and other nuclear infrastructure around Iran. We bombed the Fordo nuclear facility and other nuclear infrastructure around Iran. And World War III broke it. Nope. And then they attacked a bunch of women. Nope. And then, nope. That's what we did. And it's done. We accomplished it. Mission accomplished. Okay, that's what we wanted to do. We went in. We did it. It was amazing. And nothing else happened. And now, actually, without a bullet American boot on the ground or bullets fired, it looks like we might be closer to Iran's regime, that evil regime. We might be closer to that falling than maybe we ever have been in my lifetime, and I'm about to be 33 years old. Now, much closer to home, I was far more in favor of what we did in Venezuela. That's our hemisphere. And it's being colonized by some of the worst actors on the planet, Venezuela. Being colonized by China, being colonized by Russia, being colonized by Iran, Hezbollah. We had a mission. Go in, cut off the head, do a decapitation mission, captured Maduro and his wife, who's also indicted, brought him back, no casualty, well, not serious casualties, no killings, no loss of equipment. We did it, got it done. Now there's a 3-point plan in place. See, I'm starting to believe, actually, that America can actually have America's interests advanced through military action. And watch what happens in Venezuela. Watch what happens in Iran. We might just see that advancing America's interests, a byproduct of that, not the singular product, not the prime product of that, a byproduct might be that some really, really evil men might lose their positions of power. And innocent people might have a chance to flourish. That's just the byproduct, maybe, of acting in the United States' best interest using our military. Not in globalist dogma interest, but the United States interests. So that's a long, lengthy preamble. I wanted to flesh that out a little bit more as we come towards the end of this week, as we get to our poll of the week. Will the United States action in Venezuela have its intended effect? Number 1 result, yes, it will. Stability for Venezuela and oil. 39% of you say yes, it'll have its intended effect. In second place, yes, it'll ensure Western hegemony for the United States. 28.5% say that's how this is going. So already a clear majority, over 60% already, say yes, this is going to turn out in its intended effect. In third place, what intended effect? Meaning you don't know what the intended effect is here. We don't have a plan. You don't know what the plan is. 28% say that, and just 5% say no, this will not have its intended effect. This is a disaster. Few responses. Alex says no idea. Mark says who knows. It's if that's the way things are moving, it would definitely be wise for the U.S. to secure trade routes, natural resources, and additional territory that would benefit America. However, it feels like 3 years from now, everything would simply be undone if and when a Democrat is elected president. Could be the case, but we can't make policy decisions now based on what ifs of domestic politics in the future. Tom says the Monroe Doctrine is meant to preserve and secure our way of life now and into the future. Not to do these things would be to endanger our sovereignty and would be dangerous for the world. That's kind of what I was articulating there, Tom. That's going to do it for today.
This has been the AM Update Week in Review. The AM Update will be back on Monday and every weekday at 4 a.m. Eastern Time.